Hello, everyone. I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews, and we're talking about the most exciting technology for me. It's my favorite topic right now, so I'm excited to have a special guest here with us today, Frederick Larson. He's president for product at Soundlines. Welcome, Frederick.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so before we begin, tell us a little bit about yourself and Soundlines.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. Happy to share about what we're doing here at Soundlines. A little bit about myself first, I guess. So I'm originally from Iceland. That's why my name is a little bit unique. I'm an engineer by training and trade. And from the beginning of my career, I've always been very interested in how healthcare and technology can intersect. Initially, at the start of my career, I worked quite a bit in global health, working in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia on solutions for the vaccine supply chain. But really through that work, I became interested in making sure that we have the right information in the right hands at the right time. And so for the past 2 years, I've been leading this effort here at Soundlines, which really is the technical and engineering organization within health channels. Channels, for those of your viewers that might not be aware, started off in 2003 as Scribe America, set the standard for training and managing scribes. And Soundlines is really focused on developing technology solutions that we can add to that human capital and deploy improved services, newer services across the health channels family of companies. So happy to be here.
Awesome, and that's what attracted me is the technology you're building. So you have a product called Speke that really helps with clinical documentation, the bane of every doctor's existence, clinical documentation. I mean, it always has been, even in paper chart world. So tell us more about your Speke product and how it works for a clinician.
Yeah, sure thing. And so the Speke is the first product that we're putting out from Soundlines within the Health Channels family here. And our design philosophy with Speke has always been that technology should live in the background. You mentioned this burden that is placed on physicians and healthcare providers to complete documentation, and that's really the fact that they've been kind of put in front of the EHR and are required to complete all the documentation themselves. So Speke is very simple by design. A provider accesses the Speke on a mobile phone or a tablet. And as they're meeting with a patient, they can do so in a very free-form conversation. It's a seamless process. They engage with the patient, and Speke is in the background capturing that conversation. And so we're able to generate a clinical note for the provider into the electronic health record system that they're utilizing for the review just from that conversation. And we're able to achieve that by combining the right mix of technology, so machine learning in terms of speaker diarization, speech to text, and natural language processing, but we turn those tools inwards. And we have a trained medical scribe within the loop. We call this having a human in the loop, kind of on the engineering side of things. This ensures that we can support a variety of different care settings and a variety of different specialties and providers that are utilizing the system today. It's been exciting to kind of launch this, and one of the examples that we've seen this materializing in the real world is in New York at the start of the year, when novel coronavirus cases were spiking. They were setting up a field hospital in Central Park, the local authorities there in the healthcare system. And so we deployed Speke into that environment to support documentation, to help the providers produce that documentation as they were attending to patients that were within that field hospital in Central Park. So it was an exciting thing. We were able to do that in 2 days. And it was quite dynamic to be able to move so quickly and get the solution into the user's hands so effectively.
Yeah, I think we're going to be hearing stories like this for a while because of COVID. So let's talk about a number of things you mentioned there. So it sounds like the workflow for the provider is to bring their own device. Is it iOS and Android? Is it both? Is it one or the other? Or does it work on any device? How's your approach there?
Yeah, so so primarily today, the provider is utilizing a mobile phone or a tablet that they have access to within the clinic. And so from a workflow perspective, they walk into the room, they're engaging with the patient, they only have to hit one button to capture that conversation. If there's anything outside of the room where they're meeting with a patient that they want to add to clinical documentation, they can do that by dropping in short updates as if they were talking to a scribe that they had with them. Today, we support iOS devices. It's a very secure platform, and we've been able to leverage that security for our solution. And then going forward into 2021 and moving forward, we'll be supporting Android devices and other platforms as well.
Gotcha. So they bring their phone in or tablet or whatever, and I guess they probably just set it on the counter or something that it can hear both the patient and the doctor, and then the scribe in the background and the AI do it, which we'll talk more about that interaction. What do you say to doctors that may be nervous about kind of trusting their documentation to someone else? I mean, it's not necessarily a new topic because scribes have been in place for years, but what's been your experience kind of overcoming that barrier of trust that a doctor would trust now, I guess, a scribe and AI to do it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a critical point to bring up, and it's something that, to be frank, our organization has been working on since the beginning. Medical scribes have been in this role from Scribe America for the past 20 years, and they have that trust from the provider to ensure that the quality and consistency is there from a documentation perspective. In addition to that, what we're able to do within the Speke system is we utilize the technology, the transcripts and the natural language processing that extract specific clinical information from that conversation, and we make that available to the scribe on the back end. So within our platform, they have access to that, but at the end of the day, that medical scribe that's trained for the specialty and the care setting ensures that the documentation is complete. And in addition to that, something that is very crucial to us, and we have users that highly value this part of our service, is we ingest and account for the specifics of provider preferences as we're generating notes for them. So we've seen ambulatory care practices where, and we have an orthopedic user that I talk frequently with. He likes very verbose clinical notes, long descriptions, review systems, and things like that, versus other practitioners that we have, for example, in the intensive care units, very succinct notes, very to the point. And we can account for all of these variabilities and carry that trust for our providers within the Speke system.
That's interesting to compare the two. What kind of quality are you able to achieve for doctors? I mean, I assume it's just as good a quality as a scribe, which is pretty high. Is that, how do you measure kind of quality and satisfaction of quality of the notes?
Yes, the quality is the core objective here. It would be worthless to provide a service that doesn't meet that quality. So we adhere to the quality standards that our partners have, in addition to the standard quality assurance processes that we have within Scribe America, making sure that we capture every single specific thing in each section of the note that is required for documentation. And we're able to provide support in a very different ways for a provider in case we see something that is required to complete that clinical documentation. We carry that experience over from our work with in-person scribes that are working elbow to elbow at the point of care with the provider. And also within our telescribe portfolio, we have remote scribes that are used to work hand in hand with the provider remotely. And within the Speke system specifically, we have an ability for a scribe that's seeing the output from our system, noticing that something might be required from the provider to complete that documentation. They're able to send a very succinct, directed notification to that provider that's utilizing Speke on the phone or the tablet to highlight to them there might be something missing in terms of information that we require to complete that documentation. So end to end, we ensure that both the quality upfront is accounted for and we know what we're targeting, and then after the fact that we're watching for things and supporting the doctor to make sure we have all the necessary information to complete that clinical note that goes into the EHR.
Interesting. And that's one of the areas that I really am excited about, is this whether it's the AI or the scribe telling the doctor, oh, you forgot about this. I think there's a power in that we're just beginning to understand. And I think it will evolve big time. But it sounds like right now, the machine learning, if you will, the AI is really making the scribe more efficient in what they do, as opposed, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Is that the long-term vision, is using AI machine learning to make more efficient scribes, which would make sense since you're a scribe company as well, right? Or is the goal eventually that machine learning will likely replace the scribe, or at least largely replace? I mean, where are you at in that continuum, and where you think this is going?
Yeah, I love this question. It's from an engineering perspective, it's very exciting to talk about how machine learning is helping us today and where we can take it into the future. We've obviously seen natural language processing and machine learning models for specific applications improve greatly for the past few years. You have applications like radiology and applications that essentially are more of a pattern matching problem where machine learning can be deployed very effectively. But when it comes to conversation between a provider and a patient, there's not a machine learning model or a pipeline that exists today that can take that free-form conversation, extract all the necessary information from it, and then produce a clinical note. And we're actually quite a ways away from it. If you think about all the different use cases and all the different care settings that we have to account for when we're thinking about healthcare across the US. And so to give you some specific examples there, where when we built Speke and we were developing the solution, we're not having the provider speak in a very specific way. There are some solutions out there, the traditional dictation tools, where the provider actually has to interrupt their flow and turn to a device or a machine and talk in a very specific way so that the machine behind the scenes understands and can produce that clinical note. From the outset, we decided that we support this seamless workflow, and we support that seamless workflow in a setting that is wherever the provider is working at. This could be the ambulatory clinic room. This could be by the bedside in the ICU, or as I mentioned, even in the field hospital. So going forward, to support and have a consistent service for that healthcare provider, we of course will be including technology and layering that on to and turning it inwards to empower the scribe to produce that clinical note for our partners. But the important part there is to deliver a real service that can adhere to the quality standards that we just discussed earlier. So we envision that larger parts of certain encounters will be automated in some settings. And at that point, we are transitioning the work of a medical scribe to extend to other parts of the encounter and the support that providers need within the clinic. So this includes things that will be required to happening before a visit, pre-visit activities, and then what happens after the visit in terms of when the clinic documentation is done and the provider needs support for other ancillary tasks. And that's something that we know a lot about through the work that our scribes have been doing with health channels for the past few years.
Sure. And I think what you highlighted there is a really important point to discuss just a little more, which is that you don't have to change your language. I think that is, I mean, that was even the knock back in just voice recognition days, right? That I have to say period, space, like enter, right? I mean, like that was the experience of voice recognition initially that, was pretty disruptive to that flow. So I think it's interesting that you're doing that. Although I guess I would question and push back. Does that not mean that the doctor still needs to share more info than they might have done in a regular visit? Say, for example, they might have just keyed in amoxicillin 500 milligrams for the prescription, and they might have just said to the patient, hey, I'm going to prescribe you amoxicillin. So are there still slight changes that do benefit the AI? And in fact, I guess they have to do for the scribe as well, the small changes, but they're still more of a natural language, kind of to your point. I guess I'm just pushing back that, like, it seems like there's some changes they still have to make, but maybe there's not keywords where they have to say, speak, please record XYZ. Is that
Right.
kind of the highlight you're trying to say?
Yeah, so the important thing to keep in mind there is we are processing conversations. So we do the light change in workflow that you could point out is verbalizing the information.
Right.
But the important thing to note here is that the way that we've designed Speak to be seamless, you can capture that conversation. But if there's something that the provider didn't want to necessarily verbalize in the room with the patient, they can drop in unstructured additions to that audio after the fact. They're stepping out of the room, they're adding that information to the system. In addition to that, you're absolutely right. You don't need to say, hey, speak, or okay, speak, or anything like that to trigger the system. And often cases, our providers want to verbalize more because they want to convey the information to the patient and make it clear to the system what they're communicating. But
Right.
it's done in a very natural way, and it doesn't interrupt the flow or force the provider to actually turn the review and focus on a computer as they're meeting with the patient. So the great thing there is it is from an engineering perspective, we've gotten some feedback from our providers on how to work within that workflow, and we've gotten some notes back. One that was very interesting to me was one of our users said, Speak was the greatest invention since sliced bread, which is of course high praise. And it kind of took me back a bit, but I think it's illustrating this point that we keep the provider experience at the forefront. We don't force the technology on them and force them to speak in a certain way. And with that, we can support accents, we can support different care settings, with just making sure that we get the right information into the audio that we're processing.
Yeah, no, and I actually think it's better for the patients as well, because many times I remember sitting in the office and the doctor's clicking away there, and I'm like, "What are you clicking?" I felt like I was lost, and and then he, maybe he would come back and tell me, maybe he wouldn't, because it just depended on the situation. And now that they have to verbalize that, I think it's good for patients. So I think it's a good change. Let's dive into the EHR integration, if you will, and because I think that's the other important topic and fear that many doctors have with this type of new technology, which I'm calling ambient clinical voice, as a kind of an overarching category, which I think is so interesting. How do you work on getting the data into the EHR? Do you do it through the Scribe logging in? Do you have interfaces? What are your approaches there?
Well, this is an interesting topic, and I love this is so much fun to talk about, specifically because with the reach that Health Channels has, we deal with a variety of different EHRs. I think effectively we work with every single EHR that is in use in the US.
Yeah, that would make sense with all the scribes.
Yeah, exactly. And so we actually use two main methods of interacting with the EHR, exactly like you said. In some cases, we have our medical scribe staff logging in directly into the EHR, entering the clinical note there. And so they process the information from our platform. They make sure that they have all the information to produce the clinical note, but then they're working directly in the EHR. And that works great in a lot of cases. And it's actually preferable for some of our partners that are using some of the more unique EHRs. Sure. And more importantly, it allows us to get up and running very quickly, because the only thing that's required from the EHR perspective is for us to have the ability for our scribe to log in. Yeah. Then, in addition to that, we also integrate Speke into the EHR. And with that, that's where our scribe is working specifically within our platform, processing information from our processing. And then we move the critical pieces of information in the right fields within the EHR through integration. And that's something that we leverage as well to drive more automation from that setting. But we've seen that it's important to maintain that ability for a scribe to log in, because getting up and running quickly, delivering a real service promptly is something that's important to our partners. And so that's a powerful tool to have in the tool bag.
Yeah, well, and hopefully the EHR vendors will finally, well, and let's blame their clients actually, will want the integrations to improve and the APIs to improve to do even more and automate even more of that. So we'll definitely be watching that to see how it evolves. It seems like clinical documentation to me is just the start. I mean, you highlighted a few areas of the scribes informing the doctor of things that they might have missed for, which I imagine is for billing or even compliance or whatnot. What else do you think Speke is going to do in the future, and where are they going to go? Is there a bigger vision beyond clinical documentation?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So starting with clinical documentation is, of course, leveraging a lot of the expertise that we have as an organization, adding technology to our labor to provide that service. And then, as we talked about before, as we automate some encounters in some parts of the node, we'll be able to fill in some of the ancillary duties that a scribe can complete for a provider. So we think of it as supporting the patient flow for a provider end to end. So supporting through Speke the ability for us to do pre-charting, signing up the patient, supporting the clinical documentation, and then this care team assistant supporting the provider in doing referrals and such things after the visit as well. And then taking that even broader, what we're seeing with our customers today is that, and I have this experience as well, when I'm meeting with my physician for my annual exam, they're using Speke and they have this tool that allows them to focus specifically on me. We're looking, it's very exciting to think about how that could be extended to the patient as well, because we see the development within telehealth. There's a lot of new and exciting things happening there where we can integrate Speke into that dynamic of having patients convey information to their providers ahead of their visit and support that overall workflow as well. And so that's just part of the areas that we're exploring now of extending Speke into, and we're going to be doing that very soon. In addition to utilizing Speke for some of our in-person work at the point of care where we have medical scribes on staff at healthcare facilities. So there's a lot of exciting things that we're looking forward to do with Speke going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about the intake stuff from a patient, there's some really interesting things that could be done to inform the doctor, to improve the flow, improve the care.
Exactly.
Whether you look at it from a clinical decision support standpoint, and how could you use that to do real-time clinical decision support in a much more targeted way? Anyway, this is why I love it so much. So I have a feeling after some people watch this, they're going to want to learn more about Speke, get a demo. This feels like the demoable product, right? It's like I got to see it to believe it. Where can people learn more about Speke?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to learn more is to go to soundlines.com. That's where we have videos and testimonials and information about the Speke system. And you can see how it works, how it looks like. And then, as you said, it's often best to get kind of your hands on the system. And through soundlines.com, you can reach out to our client solutions team, and they'll provide a personalized demo and talk through the workflow that you might have at your clinic or in your care setting, and take it from there and explore how Speke can help you and support your work as you're moving through your clinical day.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Frederick, for spending time with us and sharing about the solution. And thanks everyone for watching. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com. Thanks, Frederick.
Thank you, John.